You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by Aborn and Company. I'm your host, Kyle McNaught. Thanks for checking us out. The ubiquity of technology in your day-to-day life can make it seem like everything will have that out-of-a-box user experience, kind of like your smartphone. But when it comes to enterprise technology, that assumption can spell doom. Freight operations typically focuses on the day-to-day and let the technology folks handle sourcing and qualifying new technology. But that practice can lead to more headaches than just taking the time in the beginning. So, to talk about all this and kind of what you guys should be doing, I'm going to bring on one of Aborn's own, Bill Muse, or William Muse. But Bill Muse is our data integration and implementation manager at Aborn. He's going to sit down and help explain why having a seat at the table from day one is critical for transportation when it comes to implementing any type of platform into their operation. So, Bill, how's it going?
Lovely. Enjoying the nice fall weather finally.
Yeah, same here. Although yesterday was crazy windy over here at Aborn, so we didn't even have power at the office. So you lucked out being in North Carolina, huh?
Yes. Beautiful state. Should
nice,
come
nice.
on
Yeah, I'd love to anytime. Definitely, I think it's a remote working environment that I need to be participating in next time. Just you guys got better internet than us. I know that for a fact. So Bill, talk to me a little bit about your history. Tell me about what kind of you did before you were working here, wherever you worked, and what were you doing with software implementation?
So about 20 years ago, I decided to get into software because I was in a warehouse loading trucks and nobody else really knew how to work the computers. So it was up to me. I stepped up and was able to learn how to control the inventory, make sure we got the reports out, and make sure we got the bill of ladings printed out, and everybody was happy. And that kind of sent me along the lines of software. After that, I worked as a contractor for a hospital and learned all the lovely and amazing things of working with hospital volunteers that are old enough to be my great-great-great-great-grandmother, and all the obstacles and challenges that entails. If any of you have ever been the technical support for your parents, imagine being technical support for people old enough to be your great-grandparents. And so I learned a lot about computers then. I moved on to to help set up the testing for RF Micro, which had millions of chips a day go through it. Being able to get the testing and store the testing data in a SQL database. Then I moved on to what would soon be known, what is today known as the Android Wi-Fi stack. And I was the configuration manager there, making sure the software was repeatable, it was tested, and it passed all ISO and Wi-Fi certifications before being sent out to the customer. Then I moved on to a company called Census, which was water, gas, and electric metering. Yeehaw. So many fun things that I've done. The interesting thing about it was their meters talked to a server. It used RF to talk to a repeater that sent all the things, so nobody got bit reading the meters. And what my job was to go for every podunk town in America that used our software and make sure that everybody knew how to use it, how to bill, and how to get money. That was great stuff. Then I went on to work for MercuryGate, which is a TMS, one of the leading TMS softwares. And I was being the implementer and putting things together, making sure that I gave more innovative ideas on how to make it work for everyone around. And now I'm one of MercuryGate's customers was Aborn, and I'm with them, and we kind of rock.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just laughing at all like you really got to have the gamut of experiences when it comes to technology with your different jobs.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the industries are completely different, but software is pretty much software everywhere you go. The approaches have changed, and we have brand new approaches, so we can give it new names and somebody can make money off of a new tweak they've done to the way they implement it. But even back 20 years ago, software was not, it did different things, but being able to actually configure it and make it work for your company had to be approached very much the same as it still does today.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it helps us transition into kind of what you're doing now with Aborn, because that kind of is that that whole approach. So talk a little bit about what you're actually, what you do for Aborn right now, and especially for our clients.
Okay, so as a new Aborn employee, just coming in, coming from the software that they're having the most trouble with, I go through all the configurations that they currently have, suggest tweaks, make tweaks, change things, and pretty much stir the pot to make everything try to run smoother. It isn't an overnight sensation. It isn't a flash in the pan. It's going to happen right now. It's a very gradual. Because as you know, in this industry, nothing happens that fast. So you have to go little bit by little bit because you can't move the mountain all at once. This isn't or it'll be a Jenga tower. When you pull out that one piece, everything falls down. So I'm going to change so that the software will run smoother. I'm going to change more control of the files so we can understand what's going on from the inside and the outside, and making sure that we understand what the carriers are doing, how much on time they are, keeping that in mind every time, because as everybody in the transportation industry knows, that carrier scorecard is one of the most important things that you can keep up with, to actually know who's delivering on time. And that way, that's what we focus here on Aborn, is to provide the best service possible, not the cheapest, not the quickest, not the fastest, but the best service, the best mix of all three, so that you can get your freight and feel comfortable it's going to be where it needs to be when it needs to be.
Now, I think given your experience, I want to hear from you exactly. Talk to me a little bit about what your kind of typical experience is. You've in the past, you've been this technology folk, but walk me through what a typical experience it has been in your past when it came to implementing technology. What was it like when you'd go in?
All right, I'm going to tell a story, and literally I have about 4 of these to choose from that are all basically the same story. And one of the biggest things that has happened that really bugs me is you go in to implement a software, and it's been approved by upper management. They are all on board. They are so excited. They are so gracious for us to come in and make everything good. And then the middle management works with us, and we spend 2.5 months working our tails off to get it just like they want it. And we talk it over. We ask them questions. They give us answers, and we design the system exactly how they say that they're wanting it and they need it. And everybody's really happy. And then when it goes to actually go live date, we get the system, we put it in, we go live, we try to transfer everybody over it. And I can think of 3 to 4 different times in my experience that it won't go live date. The people who are actually doing the work, driving the forklifts, loading the trucks, said, dude, I can't even do my job. I thought you said this system was going to make it better, but I literally can't. I mean, I was trying to load this truck, and I was loading the truck, and something distracted me, and one of the barrels fell off and busted. So now I got to short this truck, or I have to get another barrel to fill it up. So I have to change the BOL, but I can't do that because you've locked it down so much, because somebody above them decided that they didn't need that ability to do.
Yeah, I mean, it makes so much sense. As I would call myself one of the glove wearers, as you like to so elegantly put, the actual doers, right? The people who have to do the work. I can think back to all the times where there was some sort of platform that it was brought on, and I'm supposed to use it. But it's hard for managers to get a grasp on what workarounds you have to create. How do you make your job kind of speedy, kind of working with that type of stuff? So it's a fascinating point. And I think it's something that kind of we're here to talk about, especially when it comes to the different platforms that keep getting brought in and all the new great digital things that everyone wants to use and stuff like that. So does a freight operator, I guess my first question when we really look at the subject of this show is, does a freight operator need to be involved in every digital platform that their company is looking to utilize?
Do they need to be involved? Absolutely.
So like ERP, WMS, TMS, all those, every one of those, or like which ones am I not thinking about?
Every one of them affects them being able to load that truck. You may think, oh, this is just a finance thing. This is just how people are getting paid. Well, you're not thinking of the holiday workers, the ones that come in for 1 month out of the year to help you out at Christmas time because you literally can't get enough hands to load a truck fast enough, or you can't get enough drivers to get the freight there. You're missing that part of it because the people in finance look at numbers and everybody's just a number, and they missed that one little detail. So if you're not working with the bottom to the top on every platform you're coming in, you think, oh, it's not going to mess with them. At the very, very least, you need to ask them, hey, if we bring in this new software, does it affect what's going on in your job? Because there are some things that are brought in that doesn't really affect them. I'm sure. I can't think of one. I mean, all the way down to the HVAC. Yeah, we still need to make sure that AC is rolling, because if we don't have good air handlers to get the exhaust from the forklifts out, that's a problem. That's a lot of times people won't think about if they don't ask. Being able to at least bring them in that design stage, and at the end when they're being stuck with it, they'll be a lot happier. It's not just to make a better software and be more successful. It's also to get the buy-in of the people who are affected by the software and digitalization of anything you're doing. If everybody feels they have an input, everybody's a better adopter. And we all know that one of the biggest problems with implementing new software or any kind of new technology is whether the people will use it or not, or whether they'll just go around it and do their own thing like they always have. If they don't have buy-in, if they don't have any input, they're not going to do it. So yes, they need to be there.
But what about, and I think that's one of the big things, but the other thing is the process. I think it's something you preach all the time. It's just how long it takes to truly implement. I mean, what about becoming too involved? Like, doesn't it slow down the process when you have to kind of force yourself to make sure your voice is heard? Like, I feel a lot of times freight operation wants to be fast and efficient. I try to make up a new word there, but they're trying to be as quick as possible. How do you make sure that you're walking that fine line where you're making sure it's something that there's going to be buy-in, but you're also not slowing down the process that is implementation?
Well, like I said, they got to be there with the design at the very minimum. And then they don't need to be there for all the tedious day-to-day test this, test that, test this. It takes forever and a day to go through to set it up and test little bits. You get them in for the design. They give you all the things that can go wrong. They give you a huge list of things you never even thought of, and then they can go back and do their job as you're setting that up. Then a couple 3 weeks down the road, you say, hey, we think we've fixed these problems, and I think that we have accounted for this, that, and the other. Will you just look at it over with us? So you're taking a couple hours out of their day 3 weeks down the road. They're not having to be there the whole time, but they still have that ownership. They still have that ability to embrace what's going on, because you're not forgetting them. You're not leaving them out. You're not forcing anything on them. You're asking them, how can we make your job better? If you want them to use it when you're all done, you're going to have to engage them from the beginning and a few times during the middle, but they don't have to be there. If they're there for every step of the way, all you're doing is boring them. They don't want to know how it ties into the finances. They don't want to know how it ties in to the HVAC or how it ties into the warehouse management system. All they care about is, hey, will this make it easier to do my job? They don't have to be there for every little step, but you need to have them in there in the design phase, and you need them to test anything that affects them. That goes for not just the freight operators. That's not just for the ones who wear the gloves and do the work. The one who wear the ties need to be in the same things too, because the one who wears the ties, they like to hear themselves talk. They like to be important. So you don't want them in there every day. You want people that will actually help you get it done. You have them there in the beginning in the implementation, and then you bring them along at certain points to make sure you get their input, keep their buy-in, and give them ownership. You have your core group of 4 to 8 people that actually does the work and does the implementation, does the configuration. You don't have to have everybody involved at every step, but you have to have them in the beginning, because you get that buy-in. If you have everybody involved at every step, you will be bogged down. You need your core group, and you need everybody, then you need your core group. Then you need to take that core group, needs to go to each individual area and have them test their stuff until it's time to test the whole thing at once. So you're not bogging everything down. You're being more efficient with everybody's time, and you're being able to give a better product, have more success and more buy-in.
So, I mean, we all know that the buy-in is one of the big issues, right? If you're not, if you take a very hands-off approach, the likelihood that you, at the end of the day, feel like, hey, this tool really is working for me, it knows everything I do. It's not that, but that's a well-known issue. What about some other issues that a shipper's not thinking about when they don't have the hands-on? I mean, you have just so much cool history. Talk about some things that, like, you kind of talk about, like HVAC. That's something a shipper, believe it or not, should care about when it comes to their digital, like a digital platform being brought into their enterprise. What are some other issues that someone, like, why you kind of, when you're sitting there thinking like, I could just let those guys handle this for me. I know the buy-in, but I know my guys. I can make them buy into this system because it's they love me. They'll do anything for me. But what's something else that you're not thinking about?
When they take a hands-off approach, they're going to take care of it, because if you let them have a hands-off approach, they're just going to keep doing things the way they always have. That's the biggest thing. So something that you wouldn't think about is, especially the guys who wear the ties, think the guys who wear the gloves are not as smart as them. So therefore, they design the system the way that they think they're dumbing it down for those who are on the docks, when really they're not allowing the people on the docks to do what they need to do. Middle management, upper management do this all the time. They don't need to do that. That'll just slow them down. Well, they don't need to do that on a day-to-day basis, but there are times where they're going to need to do that. So don't take away the ability to do it. Just try to do it for them. And then if it's wrong, give them the ability to correct it. Don't take the abilities away from them. Make it easier to not have to do that, and that way they'll do it. If you design a system where it's easier to use the system than to go around the system, people use the system. If you make it more difficult to use the system than to go around it, people will go around it. It'll take the path of least resistance. Design your system to be that path of least resistance. It's funny you talk about the HVAC and bringing in technology. If you're bringing in technology, you have to have some form of computers in your warehouses. If you don't have a cleaner environment, you have more problems with your technology. People don't think about that. You just put a computer in a dusty, nasty rubber filled, because this is what happens when you use forklifts and there's thousands of pounds running back and forth. The little rubber dust gets everywhere, and the little black dust you think of everywhere, it's from the tires. What happens, that little atomized dust gets all in your computer, and then it starts acting funny. And then you start slowing down production because they can't print out the BOL. They can't get the computer to turn on. The computer's acting funny. The monitor's just dead today. It has lines on it. I can't read it. It's things like that you don't think about. And if you've never really done anything like that, it'll be fine. We'll just put a computer over there. But you've got to be careful. If you can put a computer over there, and that's where it gets too hot, computers don't like heat. You can't put a computer where it's going to be too hot. If it is an outside warehouse, you need to make sure there is ventilation where the computer is. You can't just stick it under a desk in a 100-degree warehouse and expect it to work forever. It's going to give you 4 or 5 months maybe, and then decide it's just going to melt. And it's not going to look like it's going to melt, but the soldering, literally around 110 degrees, 120, will start to soften, and gravity will make things move just a tiny little bit and mess you up.
Sorry, I wasn't even thinking about that. Just the physical presence. You'd think online, you'd never even think about all that type of stuff. But that's fascinating. And I loved your whole point earlier too about the idea that, hey, let them say what like doesn't work with this thing, and let them kind of help you out with kind of like creating all this type of stuff. That's all just great points right there, Bill. Sorry to interrupt you, but if you want to continue, otherwise, I mean, we can kind of move on. It depends on what you want to do.
Keep on moving on.
All right. I think we're kind of getting a little later in the time, so I kind of want to start to wrap up and kind of move on to the next part. But I think um, we understand that there's issues, right? There's things that you don't want to do. And we understand too that a lot of times that the people with the ties don't want to bother. But what are, in your experience, why does a shipper, why is someone avoiding getting involved? I mean, I think at this point it's kind of industry knowledge, right? That hey, not being involved could be an issue. It's really hard to get buy-in. Your computer could melt because you're not even thinking about that. But what's been why does a shipper avoid getting involved in technology?
It's a hassle. It's not easy. It's not flip a switch. Anybody can sell you software and says, "Oh, we are a one size fits all. We can get it all the way configured. We can have you up and running in 48 hours." Up and running means something totally different to different people. Up and running to me means it helps me with my business. Up and running to someone else is, hey, the server is flipped on and it has your name on it. Now it's up and running. This is not a flip a switch and go with it. Technology, I mean, even an iPhone, when you get an iPhone, it is the least configurable thing in the world. They make it so it is made for grandmothers. And the greatest thing about Apple is they make it very easy to use. But when you turn on that iPhone, you can't just turn it on and make a call the first time, can you? Now, you've got to get Verizon, AT&T, or whoever it is to say that phone can make a call. And when you turn it on, there are 57 steps for you to go through to say, this is my iPhone. Yes, I paid for it. This is who I need to connect to. This is how I want to connect to. This is the color I want the font. I need it bigger because I'm old and can't see very well. There are thousands of configurations just for an iPhone, and it's the easiest piece of software you will ever configure. The reason shippers don't want to get involved, the way nobody really wants to get involved with this, is it is not easy. It is not a flip of a switch. It requires having patience. That's something we struggle with in today's society, is having patience. The other thing is, the last 10 pieces of software we're told that was going to save us money. Well, software doesn't usually save you money. You spend it on different things. You spend it on people being able to support that. You spend it on storage, hosting, those kind of things for the software itself. Software needs to be approached as a way to make more money, not save you money. Because when you're not spending time spinning your wheels on problems, you can find new business. Software, too many times the shippers have been burned because they went into it thinking it's going to save them money. This is going to find the cheapest freight. This is going to find the cheapest way to get my stuff from A to B. Well, guess what? They charge less money, but they're always late. And now you're paying late fees. If you don't take the time beforehand to realize all the problems that you can run into with it, it's not going to be successful. And people don't want to do that because they don't want to take the time. It's working okay as it is. We've already figured out all the problems with what we have. When you bring a new piece of software, a new piece of technology in, those problems might go away, but a whole new set's coming. And we all know this by now. Technology might solve one problem, but it'll create another. And the best way I can say that is, my children think it's the end of the world if they have a zit. It's literally the end of the world. You get older, yeah, we have problems. We fix the whole zit thing when I get a zit, whatever. There's other things. Every time you fix one problem, there's another one coming down. I like to go with the problems I know. It makes it an easy fix. I have to jiggle the key in the ignition just right, and it'll turn the key on. But if I get another car, it'll have all kind of problems. That window won't roll down, or that door doesn't unlock well. Every time you get something new, it's scary. It's hard. You have to get used to it. You have to figure out the ways around it. So they don't want to get involved. And when you don't involve your freight operators, you're not hearing all the problems that can happen. All the problems they currently have, you're not accounting for them. So you're not getting them involved to make it easier on you. It's going to give you a lot more problems in the long run. Just because it's easier right now does not make it easier in the long run.
Right. And I think one of the things that's the hardest problem, right? At least what I'm starting to see more and more is that the idea, like, right, that you buy an iPhone, you have the Verizon person right there. So when you're like, hey, how the hell do I do this? Usually they're right there. You don't really buy it out of box because it does take implementation. It does take setting some stuff up. And I think one of the biggest issues is resources, especially that's when you know there's problems out there, but you also understand that like it's going to take me hours to get research and find this right answer. I think that's a big issue. And I think it sort of transitions into kind of the main crux of why I even had brought you on the podcast today, which is to talk about an upcoming webinar you have where you're going to start kind of help freight operators understand what you need to communicate when you're transitioning to a digital platform, because I think that's one of the most fascinating things. I mean, in theory, it's why we brought you on, right? Was we were struggling with the resources at Aborn, finding these answers. So bringing on an actual person who can help out, I think it's valuable as all get out. So talk to me a little bit about the webinar and what you're planning on talking about. And that webinar is on Tuesday, October 22nd at 10 a.m. Free to register at abornandco.com/webinar.
All right. So in my experience, not only do you screw up when you don't get your freight operators involved, you don't get your forklift drivers involved, you don't get your people that wear gloves, as I like to say. You don't get them involved, you're going to be not successful. Now, other than that, I talk about two of the main things where I see implementations literally fail. Not just have to reset and go again. When you don't get your people on the road that actually do this stuff, if you don't get them involved, generally you're going to have to reset and tweak a whole lot of stuff. But these are the things that I've seen make implementations fail. In other words, they backed out and now they're in a legal battle with the piece of software that says you didn't deliver what you promised. And you need to know these things going into any new software, especially like in a TMS. And that's kind of what we're going for is when you're doing this, when you're going in and implementing a new software, what are the most important things that you need to watch out for? Because this is what I've seen make it fail, whether it be a Wi-Fi stack, whether it be a meter system, whether it be a testing for the microchips that go in a cell phone. All these things have breakpoints in common that make them fail. And that's kind of what we're talking about. One of the two major things that I've seen that make implementations of digital technology fail.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a fascinating conversation. I mean, full disclosure, I've actually gotten to hear you present this. So it's absolutely something you need to be listening to. Bill's amazing. He's got his fun Southern witticisms, tons of things he comes up off the top of his head. And it's only a half-hour webinar, which I'm not entirely sure we're going to be able to pull that off, given that this is a half-hour podcast. It was all just to tease up the webinar. So we'll see how that all works out. But the best part about that webinar, it's super interactive. We're going to have polling. You can ask questions of Bill the entire time. So abornandco.com/webinar. That's where you can register for free. It's on Tuesday, October 22nd at 10 a.m. Eastern time. It will be on demand, but trust me, you're going to want to ask questions of Bill. You're going to want to interact with Bill. Bill's just a great guy. Moose is my favorite. So Moose, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem, man.
Man, have a great day. Enjoy the fall. Hopefully you have a fire this weekend. I'm smoking up some ribs, so I'm excited.
Sounds great and tasty. Talk to you later.
Bye. And that's our show. Huge thank you to Bill. I feel like I owe Bill not only like drinks and candy and dinner and food. I just need to practically marry him because he's becoming my work wife in terms of how much I'm relying on him to help me out with everything. And I'm sure our clients feel the same. So again, huge thank you to Bill. And you should reach out to Bill and talk to Bill. He's such a fun guy. LinkedIn's probably the best way. It's William Muse, Muse. you'll know it's him. He's got a very interesting profile picture if it's still up, but you'll see. Bill has headshots that I've taken, but he really liked his former photo. So yeah, definitely reach out to him on LinkedIn. And if you want an even quicker way to interact with him, again, that webinar, it's going to be a fun time communicating your freight operation needs when transitioning to a digital platform. It's going to be on Tuesday, October 22nd at 10 a.m. Eastern. There is an on-demand thing, but trust me, you're going to want to do the live so you can interact with Bill and get to have your questions answered. I mean, that thing that we talked about in the podcast, the biggest issue is when you're trying to find, how do I say this? What am I learning? Why is this failure happening? It's because you don't have as many resources as you think when it comes to technology implementation. So Bill's here to answer your questions. The webinar is to present a little bit, but at the same time, we want to interact and help out the industry. So abornandco.com/webinar to register. Otherwise, there's nothing else for me to really talk about. So I'm Kyle McNaught. Thanks for listening. Peace.